transit is nothing else but an economic driver. Moving people is about economics, and yes, it's also about softer issues, off-peak travel, connecting communities, all of that. But in its essence, it's about driving the economy of a region, the economy of a country.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Library podcast. I'm Dama Tamanawala. You know my co-host, Garrett McGillivray. And joining us today is the president and CEO of Metrolinx, Phil Verster. Phil, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, you too. Can you describe a little bit about your position and a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are?
Well, leading the development of transit in GTHA is really crucial for us. We have a region where we have to move more people, and we have to move them faster, better, and quicker, and easier across the region. Simple logic behind that is that everything we do in transit is an economic play. Everything we do is about delivering economic benefit. I'll give you some facts. On our Go Expansion program, for every dollar that government invests in the Go Expansion program, the economic benefit of $2.60 is achieved. And so the quicker we get transit built, the quicker we get those economic benefits. And in the world we live in today, moving people is crucial. It's going to be interesting what a post-COVID world looks like, and we are now in the process of thinking how we adjust our transit value proposition to communities for that post-COVID world.
It's interesting. Well, yeah, it's. I mean, thinking about that, like I don't really think about taking the streetcar today.
Yeah.
But like what are some of the early ideas and how are you guys kind of adjusting?
Yeah, so Damon, you see the key issue here is about what is your value proposition for your transit rider. If you think of streetcars, and as you mentioned the streetcar there, you have the old value proposition in your mind of how the TTC used to operate their streetcars and how congested it may be and how it operates. Now, on Go, we have changed our value proposition. We've always been about safety. We are obsessed and we are like maniacs about safety. So safety is never jeopardized. But what we've done now with our value proposition is we've expanded it to include health. So what does it mean when you say your value proposition to customers is about health, safety, as well as getting them from point A to point B? Well, you change what you're doing, you change how your operations work. I am closing all of my ticket sales at my stations. I'm bringing all of those people out from behind the counters. And we are now distributing them across our platforms and our stations to directly interact with customers and help customers. How? Well, I'm opening something like around 20 health kiosks at all of my stations. A health kiosk is a place where you can go and have your temperature checked and be given advice on COVID-19 and how to combat COVID-19, given a sense of what a face covering does for your own impact on others around you. We take some of those people we're taking out are now going to do cleanliness checks on trains and buses. We are now cleaning our buses twice every 24 hours, where in the past it was once, twice, 3 times a week. We are adding hand sanitizer dispensers at every doorway for every train and every bus. We've added polycarbonate screens to keep our drivers safe. But here's something that's really cool that we're going to do, and you guys have an inside line purely because of the timing of this interview. What I can give you a scoop on is that we are going to add polycarbonate screens between seats on trains.
Wow.
Now, and on buses, between the seats on buses. So think of that. Think of that a little bit. That's like you go and sit in your seat and you have a sense of privacy from the person that sits right next to you.
Wow.
And now you can think of that as a value proposition. So that's changing what I offer as a transit product, it's a transit product, a transit service that you buy. And so that's a massive investment, but we thought about this very carefully, and we're going to roll it out in the weeks to come, and it's going to be really cool because think of it from our perspective, logistically. How do I maintain physical distancing and still be able to move thousands of people? My capacity in my vehicles without screens between seats would be vastly reduced. And if you keep physical distancing on a streetcar, as you've said, I mean, you travel on a streetcar often, how much of that streetcar would be full? And they'll have to run 3-4 times as many streetcars to move as many people. So we're doing it with a very practical view, but with a keen view on what value it presents to the customer to focus on health.
Right.
Will these screens be permanent?
Yeah.
Might actually prevent some man spreading, as they call it.
Yeah, exactly. Man spreading. Just think of it. The challenge that it presents is we are now introducing another surface that people could interact with. So we're experimenting with really new technology that has antimicrobial features to it that we spray on the surface. That means the surface can be contaminated by you touching it, etc., and leaving it unsafe for the person thereafter. So we are really massively investing in that type of forward-thinking technology, and I've not seen anyone else make this type of radical move with regard to creating capacity on their vehicles. But we can, and the reason why we can is our market is a longer distance market. When you talk about the streetcar, it's a really short distance, hop, skip, and jump sort of journey. We're talking about people that travel in 30 minutes, 40 minutes journeys sometimes, and shorter as well. And so with that traveler and that product we sell for that traveler, this works.
It's interesting. I'm excited to touch on different markets because you're from a different market, actually.
Yes.
Right. So can we chat about that a little bit? Your career path of you grew up in South Africa?
That's correct. Yes, Cape Town.
Cape Town. Okay. And then one part of your career was in the UK as well, right? Can you talk a little bit about what you were doing there and then the move to Toronto? And this is a 10-part question, but what you see, how you see Toronto positioned versus global transit everywhere else?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, and I'll have to think how to keep that short because I've been in so many places.
Yeah.
But yeah, originally Rolls-Royce recruited me to go and run a business in the northeast of England, and I left South Africa after working in electricity supply industry and went into manufacturing with Rolls-Royce. Ran large projects in the Middle East and in the UK itself. Then joined Bombardier and ran different roles operated train fleets as a fleet director and deputy CEO for Irish Rail in Ireland. Then went to Scotland first came back to the UK as a managing director of a large part of the UK infrastructure. and then ran Scottish Rail, and then came here. And I'll tell you what's the most interesting observation is when you think of Great Britain. Great Britain is a fantastic country, but geographically very small. And think of Japan as a fantastic country, but geographically very small. So when size goes down, physical size or square kilometers per capita goes down, the impact of transit becomes massively more relevant. And that's why Britain's invested in transit, and Japan and places like that invested in transit. And the exception to the rule, really, to a certain extent, is China, where they've also invested significantly in rail, more high-speed rail, because of the geography being so big, and they see economies of scale and huge economic impetus behind connecting cities with high-speed rail. And so when you ask me to compare Toronto, this is the way we need to think about it. Transit is nothing else but an economic driver. Moving people is about economics. And yes, it's also about softer issues, off-peak travel, connecting communities, all of that. But in its essence, it's about driving the economy of a region, the economy of a country. And we see that over here in Toronto in a big way. And I think even in a post-COVID world, the world is going to change due to COVID, but in a post-COVID world, I see the same economic impact from transit. And so when I compare what we do here, the scale of investment in rail-type transit needs to be continuous, consistent over many years in order to build up momentum, expertise in the industry, and to continuously grow the infrastructure base and the operational base to get better at it.
Right. And
I think where Canada, I say to my team, Canada is not a big country, it's a gigantic country. And it is gigantic in terms of the square kilometer per capita. And with that in mind, the transit industry is relatively small. And the investments are not really, in the past, has not really been consistently made, gradually grown as it could have been, because it's a smaller industry. But when you look at the last couple of years, it's very impressive how governments, and especially the current government, has solidified their commitment to transit and has made these huge investments. And this government's investment in subways is phenomenal, as well as the investment in GO expansion is phenomenal. And if you look at the number of LRTs out there, Finch West LRT, Ontario LRT, these are transformational projects which are just going to change the region and the cities in such a big way. And so it's a fantastic time for transit in Ontario and in Toronto.
Interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Garrett.
So Phil, you made mention of China in terms of their high-speed bullet trains, the ones that they go in excess of 300 kilometers an hour, stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that type of technology, and even stuff like Elon Musk's Hyperloop and stuff?
Yeah, Garrett, you shouldn't ask me questions like that. I'm an engineer. I mean, for heaven's sake, what do you think I'm going to say? I'm exhilarated by that. I think Elon Musk he's off the charts for me in terms of, is phenomenal what he's doing. And I can tell you, the Shinkansen in Japan, I've been in Japan a couple of times, and those bullet trains, man, it's pure pleasure. It's the coolest thing out. There's nothing cooler than a train that runs fast. This is the coolest thing in the world. I love it. The more serious part of the question is how do you apply it? What's the value proposition for high-speed trains in the country and communities you are in? And I've got a lot of sympathy and empathy for our via partners and via running trains between the different cities in Canada. They often run on someone else's track, like one of the freight operators. Their clientele is very well served by via. But you do wonder whether on these vast distances, whether a high-speed train can become an alternative to the main competitor would be airlines, and can become a viable alternative across the country. There was some time ago, there was talk of high-speed trains in Ontario, which will never pay for itself. You need to connect large centers of society, large communities. You think in the UK, connecting high-speed 2 is all about connecting London to Birmingham and then to the north, to Manchester. And then there's a branch or a Y that leads off to Leeds. So these have to be large centers of population that you connect. And unfortunately in Canada, we don't have as many large centers, and they are so far apart that even a high-speed train would struggle to compete with airlines, because the airplane obviously goes much faster than a high-speed train. So it's an interesting time for these types of technologies, and I think we'll see more of this in the years to come. But for now, I think transit's focusing in Canada is going to be about regional and local economic development.
Hey there, everyone. This is Garrett. Just wanted to give a shout out to our sponsor, Green Fox Capital. They are a boutique mortgage financing firm that really differentiates themselves by giving the best referral fees on the market. If you're a broker and you have a client that needs to get a deal financed, these guys at Green Fox Capital will not only get it done, they will be giving you 50% of the fee as a referral. That means as a broker, you could be earning upwards of an additional $100,000 a year on the deals that you're already doing. And guess what? They'll protect your clients. Check them out at greenfoxcapital.com and drop them a line about any deal you might be working on and see what they can do. Thanks.
Can you, and transit, when you talk about economic development, it is such a critical factor in everybody's decision making when developers are thinking, okay, now I want to buy that parcel of land. Now it makes sense. We've had Derek Goring on here to talk about the Unilever project in the past. That was actually the first episode. Can you talk about how you select sites and how you decide where a transit hub goes or an LRT, like what line it's going along?
Yeah, absolutely. And Derek is a friend and a colleague, and sitting on the opposite side of the table when we negotiated what the Unilever site would look like, and how that would become East Harbour and integrate into our network. And East Harbour, we are now working closely with Cadillac Fairview, who procured that project from First Gulf, and fantastic relationships with developers, and really important relationships with developers, because come back to the original proposition, transit is nothing if it's not an economic enabler, and it enables the developments at those locations in a big way. So when we decide on where an LRT route goes, we look at concentrations of people, concentrations of jobs. We look at regional and local growth plans. We look at community objectives to connect different parts of the community and to connect people to jobs. And nearly always, pretty amazing what in the last 2.5 years since I've joined here, one of the things that I find pretty amazing is we've really tightened up on our business case analysis so that I can sit and talk to the two of you and say, every dollar invested in Go pays back $2.60. I think you've got to have that level of clarity of understanding of what transit delivers in order to be able to say to a minister, this is the benefit cost ratio, which in the case I've just given you is a benefit cost ratio of 2.6. every dollar gets $2.60. So having that, you then start to think and say, all right, so how many people do I connect? How many people do we connect along a particular corridor? And what's the economic value and economic payback of people traveling 15 minutes shorter journey time from point A to point B? And what does that do for creating a momentum behind a particular geographic area's economic job creation and economic contribution? And we do that. And then when the business case washes its face, you can clearly, a benefit cost ratio of 1 is break even, isn't it? The benefits equal the cost, and it's 1. Everything above 1 is you're in the money. And therefore, once we understand that, then we go through a discussion with the local community on what this intermediate stops look like and where they should be, and we do that conversation. So everything is business case driven, fact based as best you can determine the facts on economic models and what the future looks like. Okay,
I've got one for you then, Phil. Where is, because we're always looking for scoops here.
Yeah.
Where are certain areas, maybe in Toronto or Hamilton, where the benefit cost ratio is very high, but there aren't yet plans for transit there? Otherwise, I'm asking, where should I be buying right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. All right, so I'll answer that truthfully because I've indicated this before. In terms of GOA expansion, and give you a sense of the impact this has on the community, my highest priorities for delivering GOA expansion and increase, therefore, the frequency of GO trains has been the following locations. Kitchener. Kitchener is crucial. And I think we should all have longer-term aspirations to extend the Kitchener service out to London. Second one that is massively important is Durham. The Bowmanville extension is going to be absolutely transformational for Durham, and Durham is a fantastic part of the region, which I love the Durham region. Milton. On the Milton line, we are working closely with colleagues in Canadian Pacific, or CP, to run more services along the Milton line, which would serve Mississauga and the region of Peel and fantastically better. And then on the same sort of level of priority, Niagara and Hamilton. We completed a piece of work as short a time ago as yesterday that provided a third track and signaling around Bayview Junction, which allows a massive flow of trains into that part of the region. And at the right time, these things, Damon, these are game changers. I mean, since we've started running services to Niagara last year, the number of articles we've seen of how house prices have been growing in the Niagara region is phenomenal, directly attributable to the expansion of GO services. So I think I've given you 4 or 5 options there to go buy houses.
Yeah, that's wow. Yeah, I know. Like, that was, my sister just bought a house in Mississauga. I think she's 2 minutes away from the GO station, 2 minutes walk. So I mean, a direct impact there for sure. That was a new development project too. Can you share a little bit, Phil, about you guys have a 2041 expansion plan? Can you share a little bit about the grander vision for that strategy?
The simplest way, given how we've discussed what transit does to communities already in this conversation, the simplest way to crystallize a plan such as 2041 is to say, how many people in the region are close to a bus stop for high-frequency bus service, or a subway, or a streetcar, or a heavy rail GO station today? Now that answer is about 9%. And in 2041, we want that answer to be around 36%. And so there's no better way to crystallize a vision for the future into one or two simple measures. And when you figure out that transit is all about just connecting communities and connecting people, then you have to ask yourself, how accessible is it and how easy can people get it? You're talking about your sister being 2 minutes from a GO station is phenomenal. Not everyone is. It's not possible for everyone to be that close to transit. And so our intention, therefore, is in the next couple of years to expand, for example, east-west bus services to a high frequency where there aren't heavy-duty rail or heavy rail solutions such as GO, and where there isn't subway solutions because of the scale of the country, the scale of the region, to have more connectivity so that people can at least make a two-step journey, bus first and then connect to either a subway or heavy rail or an LRT. And I think what's crucial, therefore, and this is the real conundrum that we are still working on, is when you create that connectivity and infrastructure, you must support that connectivity with an integrated fare system. An integrated fare system has to help people to not have to pay fares twice, and to have a single fare approach. Therefore, when someone travels from my way into Toronto or from Toronto into York, there must be a smooth, easy to understand fare system to use. And I think that's a big part of what the 2041 vision looks like.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, there's nothing like the maybe I shouldn't bring this up, but there's nothing like the fear you feel when you get on one of the transit, you get on a streetcar or something, and the credit card thing no longer works, and you're late for a meeting, and you see the ticket man coming up, he's waiting at the hub. Oh my God, it's just petrifying. So. Are there any, like when we talk about Unilever and big hubs like that, like a big obstacle is funding, even if you can make the business case? Like is there any challenge still with getting funding to support these projects? And can you talk a little bit about how that works, working with, I guess, our cities, our Ontario, and then the federal guys?
Yeah. Never easy to get funds. Funds are prioritized according to what communities want. The hospitals need to be built, courthouses need to be built, roads need to be built. And so a focus on understanding what benefits an investment brings, this business case thing, this benefit cost ratio way of thinking, fact-based decision making, is crucial, because you can say this project is a good one because this is the returns it gets you. So when you have that thought in the back of your head, and then think about how does transit coexist with developers? Developers think the same way. They've got a benefit cost ratio and a business case and an investment strategy that gives shareholder value for their shareholders. And so what we do with developers is we work towards creating as much alignment as possible between the objectives of a developer and the objectives of the railway and the transit system. And where those coincide and can be aligned, a marriage is made, a deal is made, and that's the way it works. Now, clearly, we understand what the benefit is of a developer contributing to a transit solution, and when we get that mix of interests right, then we can easily, from that point onwards, take it further to a funding discussion with government. And we've had phenomenal agreements. We are working closely with a Cotel group in Innisfil to finalize a very ambitious station development as well as a community development. We've done the same with Woodbine Entertainment Group over at Woodbine. We've done the same at Mimico with a development partner there. And we're working closely with Cadillac Fairview at East Harbour, and I can keep on listing the investments. And I got to say, we're working very closely with Durham Region on the Bowmanville extension, whereby we're going to build 3 stations at least. That's going to be built 3 or 4 stations even. That's going to be built by developers on that extension, and these are fantastic developments. And a station becomes more than just a point where you get access to transit. It becomes a place where you anchor developments around the community, because youngsters like the two of you are less and less likely to say, well, my first buy that I make in my life is my car. We see the younger generation being a distinct market segment that is more about living and moving around freely and not necessarily automobile bound as my generation was. So catering for that market is extremely important. And I think stations and developments at stations, sort of a work, live, play type of world is the space we're moving into more and more.
Hey there, everyone. This is Garrett. Just want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Green Fox Capital. They are a boutique equity and mortgage financing firm that operates across Canada. They differentiate themselves from the rest by having some of the lowest mortgage broker fees out there. Their goal is to work with you and your property and ensure that adequate capital is in place to meet the needs of your real estate strategy. Their team has closed over $5 billion worth of real estate financing in the past couple of years alone and have connections to over 300 direct sources of capital. I recommend you check them out at greenfoxcapital.com and send them a note about any potential deal that you may be working on and get some good, no pressure advice. Thanks.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Now you've got the cogs in my brain spinning about mostly about Durham Region. It's exciting. So Garrett, do you have any more questions before we move on to the last one?
Yeah, I had just one quick question. I was thinking of a unique project. It's actually New York City. I know Toronto's not exactly as developed as New York City yet, but the Hudson Yards project. That's one, Damon, in case you might not know, they developed over top of the rail yards, effectively.
Right.
I know Metrolinx owns a majority of the tracks that they operate. Has there been any interest in terms of like the air rights, even like downtown Central Union Station, stuff like that?
Oh man, air rights. This is the way of the future, I think. So yeah, we have a very active interaction with at least one developer, but more likely going to be 2 or 3. Very well-known developers that are planning to overbuild the rail corridor in the Union Station vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. No matter how much I like trains, rail corridors are not really nice on the eye. You know, it's not gorgeous to look at, except if you are sad like me. I mean, I like it. But for the rest of community and society, a rail corridor is a very industrial, mechanical thing to look at. And so overbuilds over the rail corridor, whether it's the rail deck park, as Mayor Tory is so excited about, and I support him in his excitement for any overbuild over the railway corridor downtown Toronto to take that corridor of space that's lost in effect, overbuild it with decks or with development similar to the Hudson Yards. We're very interested in that. And we're very supportive of that. It's a challenge to integrate columns that drops into my right of way, and I very very cautious to not reduce the capacity, because remember, the rail assets in Toronto, we are the custodians of that, and the rail assets are going to outlive us. And so we make decisions now that has a 150 or 200 year impact. So we need to think with a 200 year timeline in terms of what we do with our capacity. And that's the right frame of mind to be in. So if we sacrifice any space in our corridor for columns that drop down, it better be a good business case. And so we're working very closely with developers to make sure we get that right. But watch the space. You'll see more of this coming soon.
Gotcha. That's very interesting. I think that would be a really unique project. The Hudson's Yard one was phenomenal. And
it was, wasn't it? It was superb.
Oh, yeah. Great design. Love that type of stuff. It's a very innovative thing.
It is.
All right, Dama, you want to go with the last question?
Yeah, sure. So, Phil, this question is called The Three Truths. So,
a little personal, a bit of a question, yeah. So it's a little more personal.
Oh, my. You should have warned me.
It wasn't
I'm warning you now.
Yeah. But it's a good one. Okay, so years from now, you live a very long and successful life. You live well into your old age, and it's for whatever reason, it's your last day, and your friends and your family and everybody who loves you, they're all around you, and you had this great, amazing life. But for whatever reason, all of the content that you've ever created, all the books that you've written, all the speeches that you've given, they've all been erased, and you only have 3 short notes to pass on to your friends and family and the people who love you. What do you put on those notes?
Oh, my. Okay.
I warned you.
You two are devils, aren't you, to jump this one on me? All right, I'll tell you what I'll take is the three most important things. And you know, often I do a lot of mentoring of young engineers and young graduates that come into our organization, and I'll share with you. These are heartfelt issues for me. Be authentic. Be authentic. Be yourself. Just all of us have that degree, healthy balance of self-doubt and self-optimism, but just live with both of that, and don't be untrue to it. Just be authentic. Be authentic. Second one is be generous. When you start out in your life, you try and achieve stuff. You try and accumulate stuff, perhaps. You try and go up the slippery pole, perhaps. You try and get to the top. Be generous, in that journey, help others, and in your life journey, be generous. And I find that when you're generous and you help others to succeed, it's much more satisfying. And the last one, what would I say? The last one would probably be about how much I love my wife, which would not be much help for anyone else. But my wife has been a life partner forever, and maybe it'll be along the lines of, the family and life partners are crucial for all of us. So make sure you do right by them. So those would be my 3 ideas.
Very well said. Be authentic, be generous, and family and your wife is critical.
Yeah.
Okay. Phil, thank you. You've been very generous with your time today. Thank you so much for joining us. I know everybody's going to learn a lot from this.
And thanks for having me. And it was so nice to meet the two of you. And best of luck with your podcast and for doing this. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really enjoyed your company. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Take care.